So anyone that's joined, you're welcome to just chime in if you have a question. As I said, you are free to have your video on if you feel comfortable. You're also absolutely fine to leave that off. If you do have a question, just unmute yourself and you're welcome to just chime in at any point.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
First of all, when we're doing the power up to try and figure out how many participants that we need, they have, level 2, level 3. If we are going to randomly assign classrooms within the school, so we would have an equal number of control and intervention classrooms within a school, do we need to consider the school as a level or no?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would probably lean towards the one where treatment's at level 2, and then you just treat schools as fixed.
Okay.
That's how I would consider it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. You
Okay.
said treat schools as what?
As fixed, as a fixed effect in the power up tool. Let me I can grab the power up tool and give you the actual, because they have really goofy acronyms. Let's see. I can give you the actual tab. Okay. Yeah, just give me a second. I'll pull the power up acronym up. And feel free to ask your follow-up question.
So also this is on the power up tool also. Yeah. In the presentation that you did last week or the week before, whatever it was, there was an example on one of the slides of a table where if you had this many classes, this many schools, whatever, and then it showed how many classes you would need, and they kept changing the number of eligible students within a class and how that affected how many classrooms you needed. And again, on the power up, I didn't see any place to indicate that level 1, like the number of students. It was just put in the level 2 number. So I'm not really, like, if you said level 2, it came up with 16 classes, but I don't know where the number of students within a class fits into that power up analysis, or if it matters.
Yeah, so there should be a cell for you all. I don't know if you're using the Excel. If you're using the Excel tool or the...
Yeah.
Okay. So there should be a place for you to put the, they'd call it the level 1 sample size. And that's where we varied the 3, 6, and...
Right. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't looking at it correctly. Are you going to pull that up, the power up thing, or no?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the right file for you all. Sorry. My computer is being finicky at the moment.
Andrew, is there anything that we can screen share for you?
No, so I'm just trying to find the document that I need for redoing the calculations. Okay. So let me share my screen. Okay, so do you, let me see if I can make this larger. Oops. So it would be the BC.
Oh, okay, yeah,
3
okay, I see
2F.
that.
And it would
Yeah.
it'd be this row here.
Right, I see that. Okay.
So,
See, that's
and yeah, go ahead.
what I was looking at was had different things, and in the bottom it told you how many classes you needed. So it was a different setup. The table was a different setup. So I'm not sure how I got into the wrong place.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It can be a tricky thing, but let me put the acronym into this chat as well. So they call it the BCRA 3_2F. All right. So, schools.
So the one I was looking at, they had you put in the effect size, and then it told you how many classrooms you wanted to obtain that effect size. But I didn't see a place to
Yeah,
put.
so you can essentially it's two sides of the same coin. So you would
Right.
manipulate these until you got something that was like 0.3 or larger in this row. But yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and if you use, it's kind of strange if you use like the R tool instead of the Excel. Sometimes it has you
Mhm.
solve for a different unit.
Okay.
So anyways, it should all get you to the same place, but sometimes the
Okay.
process is a little bit different if you use the Excel versus the R versus they also have like a website that you can click through at the Power Up. Oh, sorry, you said you had a second question about Power Up.
The second one, well, those were the two questions about the levels and about that. I have several other questions, but I'll let somebody else go for next.
Yeah, and I should say too, like if anybody has a question that they don't want to forget, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we can also use that as a running queue as well. So you also probably have the questions written down, but we can do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who was next after Nancy, but if nobody else wants to chime in, feel free to go to a third question, Nancy.
Okay. It's on the different documents we've had, they said that NWEA would help you with the randomization. If we're randomizing by class, not by student, you would do that. You would choose which teachers, which classrooms would get the intervention and which classrooms would not.
Yeah, so essentially we would get a roster that would just have all of the eligible classes that are part of it, and then use essentially like a random number generator, a random process to assign the two, and then just kick it back to you all as like, here are the conditions.
Okay. Okay. And it said we're supposed to track student participation. So suppose we're using, let's say, an iPad, and we can record on the iPad by student, you know, how much time they spent on the intervention. Where should we be storing that data? Does that matter to you where we store that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the where is not as important as being able to share it at the end. So I realize that there are probably certain types of click data and other things that if you're really tracking that over a year, it's going to be like a huge amount of data. So on the where side, I defer to whatever is kind of easier for you all. Like if it's already stored in a certain way, and at the end you can share it securely with us in like an Excel document or some other file format, that's fine. So yeah, so the where part is not as important as being able to track it.
Okay, so we can just choose any secure situation to store the data.
Yeah, and we can work with
Okay.
you all if it's something like it's easier for you to upload it monthly, so then you can get it
Mhm.
off your books, either
Right.
because it's large or you don't want to be storing it for that long. Essentially what would happen is all phase 2 finalists would have a specific SFTP for them that only your side and 2 people on our side would have access to. And you could drop it in there. We could upload it to our secure server, let you know that we did that, and then you could delete it from the SFTP on your side. And then if you don't want to store it on your side, you could also then get rid of it.
Okay, so is our the procedure for storing data, is that something that we should put on our application, or is that something you just figure, well, we'll figure that out if you're a finalist?
Yeah, I don't know if Eden, if that's like technically a row in the rubric. I would say there's probably a couple pieces of that. Like one, you'll want to be able to speak to how the data will be able to get transferred from you all to NWEA, and storage is potentially part of that. But I also imagine that when you're working with a school site, they're going to want to know how data on their students are being stored too. So
Sure.
like, right. So the answer is probably also important for that aspect of it. And the partnership side is part of the application.
Right. Okay. Okay. And so along that, do we need to obtain parental permission for this study? Is that part of the?
So from, yeah,
No?
so from our side, like our being NWEA, we don't need it. But I think it often depends on school districts. Sometimes school districts have like an people are defaulted into things and then you have to opt out. And then some school districts operate on the other way, where it's you're defaulted to opt out, and then you have to get parental consent to be opted in.
Okay.
The assessment data that is like the main outcome, so the math and science scores, those typically can be shared from a school system to NWEA for research purposes, with an agreement just between the system and NWEA. Like we don't have to go and get every parent's permission. Now, how that pertains to like intervention data is probably going to vary between the setup that the intervention provider has with the school district. So it's really between you and the schools as to what kind of permissioning you'll need.
Okay. Okay.
And just one quick extra thing to add there. So Nancy, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at the letter of commitment template that is on challenge.gov yet, but
Yes.
that does include a specific question about whether the district or network automatically opts students in or out of interventions and whether they require parental or guardian approval. So as Andrew said, that's really something that you'll need to work out with your partner districts or networks.
Okay. And just to confirm, we do not need to collect any data for the control group other than their MAP scores, which we don't do anyway. So we don't have to.
Yeah. So, and what the control kids are going to do is going to vary obviously across contexts. And so if they're not at all involved with you as an intervention provider, then you don't have to worry about tracking what they're doing. It's just important to make sure that the school site or whoever you're partnering with is having those students take the MAP assessment so that we can get that and include it in the efficacy study. But no, you don't have to track how they're spending their time.
Okay, great. That's it. That's all my questions.
Okay.
I have a question about the A school, B school scenario. And in your model that was, all A schools, the 3rd grade and the 4th grade would be treatment. And then the B schools, and the 5th grade would be control group. And then the B schools, the 5th grade would be control group. And the 5th grade would be treatment, and the 3rd and 4th would be control group. Is that the model that you would want consistently? Like one school would have 3rd grade, 4th grade, and one school would have 5th grade?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It doesn't have to be that specific ordering. It's more that the A's have to be the opposite of the B's. So you could flip that, right? It just has to be whatever the order of the A schools are between like treatment and control across those 3 grades, the B has to be the opposite for a given grade. So yeah, I should be able to do it in my head, but that gives you a limited number of combinations you can do. But
Right.
and,
Okay.
and I should say that the other thing just to keep in mind is that the reason why we provided that as an example is that sometimes there is very close collaboration across teachers within a given grade level, like the third grade teachers like work with the same instructional coach, etc. What it does assume for the AB is that they're not working with the teachers across grades, right? So the third grade is not working very closely with fourth grade, is not working very closely with fifth grade. And the reason why I say that is like, say that the treatment schools are grades 3 and 4, and then controls grade 5, but all of those teachers are working very closely together. And there's something about the treatment that changes the teacher's behavior for the better. And then they're also, because they're working closely with the fifth grade, who are the control group, are then going to influence the fifth grade teachers. Like that's what we were calling a spillover in that webinar. So that's the thing to keep in mind with the A and B, but as long as the A's and B's are opposites for a given grade, it doesn't matter how they're allocated. So it could be 3rd and 4 are control, 5th is treatment for A, and then you would just do the opposite for B.
So that brings up a follow-up question. In some elementary schools and smaller districts, the students that are considered, and this is where we get back to the definition of what students will be in the study. If they are truly identified as a special ed student, then they would be pulled out as a resource teacher, whereas students with a math IEP would probably be more in type of an inclusion class type setting. So when looking for participating schools, I think, and asking your opinion, wouldn't it make more sense to look for classrooms that would have all students working on the program? And I know that it said data would only be collected for the students that have been identified as the math IEPs. But to limit that spillover effect, you don't want to work with a school that has just a resource teacher. You want to work with a school where all the students are working within the program at a grade level.
Yeah, it does get more complicated to think about the randomization, et cetera, when you are doing the pullout model. So I wouldn't say you should avoid it, but I think your intuition is correct that if the students are kind of staying within a given classroom or grade level, kind of in a contained, inclusive environment, it's a little bit easier from the research side of it, like the evaluation side of it. And then correct that for the math one, however the school systems you're working with are identifying students who are at risk for special ed, that's your eligible pool of kids. And those are the only kids that are part of the efficacy study. Half of those students would get the treatment. The other half would be what you'd call the control group. And it is of those control groups of eligible students, you don't have to track kind of how they're otherwise spending their time. We just have to make sure, again, that they're taking the assessment in the fall and in the spring.
Right.
I should say the only thing where you would need to track them and is if all of a sudden they start getting access, like, so say you're a digital provider of something and all of a sudden you start to see logins and accounts being generated for kids from the control group. Those are things that we would need to know about. But again, that's when they would be crossing over from control to treatment, which you wouldn't want, but we would need to know if that happens.
Right. And that shouldn't necessarily happen if you're just looking at
right. Yeah. So if they're maintaining the random assignment conditions, that shouldn't happen. And then if it doesn't happen, you don't need to track what they're doing in the control group.
Right. So as far as we talked about, Nancy had a question about usage data. And if you were using all schools in a grade or a class, I mean, all students in a grade or a class, and we would give you the usage data for all students, you would just pull out the usage data for the students that you wanted to be as part of the study.
Yeah,
right?
so if it's easier for you to just send it all, we should be able to link that to the original file where we randomly assign kids, and there would be a flag for which kids were eligible and which weren't. And then, yeah, the second we are able to hone in on just the eligible kids, we would destroy the data that we don't need.
Right. And as far as the requirements for on the school side, there's really, if we're providing the usage data and you're pulling the NWEA data, there's really not a burden of data requirements for the schools, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so so the only thing that I think sometimes you have to think about during that, you can think about as like a triad, right? There's you, there's the school, and then there's us. What we need on our side is that NWEA creates essentially an ID for students that's separate from like the district created one, and sometimes and so at some point that linkage needs to happen, and sometimes schools don't want like that data transfer to come, or it can cut, like their students' data can come from you to us as long as all three of us sign like a data sharing agreement that just outlines why you're sharing the data. So like that, there's that little bit of work when we say burden, but like the actual transferring of the data it can come from you all once that agreement is signed.
Okay.
And we do that often. Like it's a common practice to kind of create that kind of an arrangement. But that's right. Like we would get the assessment data from the NWEA, we could get the intervention data from you all, and then we would link the two together from this roster. They call it like an NWEA roster ID. And so we would just work with you in the school system to make sure that those two can speak to each other.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and then the usage requirements, and it's 60 minutes per week. That's correct, right? An average to be able to use the materials.
I'm going to look to my Luminary Labs colleagues for that requirement.
You're asking about like usage requirements of the actual intervention?
Yes.
We have not specified any particular like usage or dosage requirements. I think that's really intervention dependent.
Okay.
Was there something that you read that was unclear?
I was looking at my document that I was writing to share with schools. I must have put that in there just because that's where, we feel like a good fidelity of usage.
Got it. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry. So, okay.
Yeah. So
No,
no,
good.
specific requirements in terms of dosage, usage. The only requirement is that it's implemented between November and this year and April next year. But exactly what that looks like is really up to the intervention provider. We would expect that information on that is included in your phase 1 submission.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, and I think where intensity of treatment would come in is part of like the phase 1 application, saying like talking about what the intervention looks like. There's more of a, not a requirement, but an argument to be made about the ability to actually transform students' math or science outcomes depending on which challenge you're in. And that's where you would describe it, but to Eden's point, and I just wanted to clarify because I was 99% sure there's no like minimum threshold, right? It's really just to show that there is a logical argument that you could all, or a logical justification that you are likely to transform kids' outcomes at the end of the challenge.
Okay, then when we're setting up the schools, I saw that NWEA will assist in making sure that we have enough schools and all the setup to meet the requirements of the study. Is that correct?
So we can, yeah, so this is where I should say there's our agreements with the school districts that use MAP assessment don't allow us to kind of reveal who these districts are, et cetera, without their permission. And so this is where if you reach out to the IES challenge email for NWEA with like a list of like 10 potential sites, we can go through our system, make sure that they would meet the requirements for the challenge. And then we reach out to them to see if they would like to be connected to you all. And so we can do that. We can't guarantee how fast that's going to be, in part because it's such a busy time of year that as we're reaching out to schools, to be honest, we can't control whether and how they're going to respond back to us. So there's that process that we can control. And then, yeah, we just can't guarantee how fast it's going to be.
Yeah, it is a funny time of year because schools are so busy getting started, and that's, and the schools that we know that use NWEA, you don't want to use them because they've already had the program. So you wouldn't want to, they couldn't be starting fresh, I guess is the point. The students may have been using the program for a number of years. So we're working through those challenges right now.
Yeah. No, yeah, we fully appreciate that it's a difficult period for any number of reasons. And so, yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying.
On that note, if we have schools that we know use NWEA MAP and they are willing, they're showing interest in participating, can you tell us if they meet the requirements, whatever those requirements are, in terms of, I guess, something on your end that I might not be able to determine whether or not they meet? Like, what sort of requirements do you need?
Yeah, right. So it's just making, like, when I say requirements, is that they're using like the right assessments and stuff like that. Like sometimes you won't know whether, say, a school district is using like the science assessment. And so any of the NWEA requirements that would be part of this challenge are available on the resource section. Or
right. So I would just ask them if they're using one of those on the list.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Beyond that, there's no hidden things. It's more that you can't, from the challenge.gov website, go type in a school district and figure out whether or not they meet these assessments. But if you're already talking to them, then you'll freely be able to ask them that. Yeah. So yeah, if you're already talking to school districts, you don't need to involve us right now.
Okay. And then also, I had asked this question, I don't know if it was in the chat or what, but I got this answer and I just want to double confirm it. It is possible that we can focus on just one grade if it's in that 3rd, 4th, 5th grade band. We don't have to do all 3 grades. Yes, I see Eden saying yes.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, and I'm only pausing because so there is still like the sample size consideration. So sometimes it's a little bit harder. Like you need maybe more buildings to be able to hit the same sample size if you're only doing a single grade. But rules wise and also statistical wise, like there's no reason why you couldn't do that.
Okay, because if your intervention is specifically focused on helping kids, at a specific point in learning fractions, then you might get better results if you're just focusing on one grade. Then okay.
Yeah, well, and also we wanted to honor the fact that like not every school system has the same grade structure, and so sometimes what we would call K-5 is like the modal elementary school, but it's not the only way that people structure grades, and so sometimes you can't get access to 5th grade.
Right. Okay.
I should say, happy to have you all stay on too. We don't know if more people are coming to ask questions, but as Eden said at the beginning, this will be recorded too. So if there's something that was said that you didn't take down, or if you have to jump off and there was questions that were asked in the next 30 minutes that you wanted to see, you'll be able to see those. But you're more than welcome to kind of stay. And if nobody's asking questions, like feel free to kind of hang out with your camera off until maybe there's more activity. But
if we do get agreements from a schools, then should we contact you ahead of time or just put that on our application? Like, do you want to know that, Andrew?
On our end, like the logistics wise, I don't think so, because we're really not going to be doing anything until we know who the phase 2 finalists are, right? Because at that point, then there's the random assignment, and not everybody, if there's lots of people applying, there's fewer slots for finalists than there would be people who are applying. But I would say, yes, you would very clearly want to put that as part of the application. But for the NWEA side, for the logistics of the phase 2 evaluation, we don't need to know that now.
Well, I just mean, I've been getting emails from you guys about how you're trying to match me with people and all that.
Yeah, so I take that back. Yeah, if you have asked for matching help, yeah, thanks for that reminder. You could send us a note and say, actually, I think we've hit our quota.
Okay.
And then Nancy, just building on that in terms of the actual submission, there's no need to get in touch with the challenge team in regards to kind of school acknowledgements and confirmations, just as long as you include all of the necessary files as part of the upload on challenge.gov. So
Right.
just making sure that you've got both the letter of commitment or letters of commitments if necessary, and then also the school acknowledgement from participating schools. The challenge team does not need to see any of that in advance, just as I said, as long as it's included in your final submission. And then if you do have any issues accessing those templates or any questions about those, feel free to reach out to the challenge team. Just a reminder, you have a couple of weeks left. So the sooner that you can kind of let us know of any issues or questions, the better.
Okay. Thank you.